The interview is being conducted for the Veterans History Project for the Library of Congress. The veteran's name is Ireland Regnier. He was born on March 2nd, 1925. He served in the Army during World War II. He achieved the rank of Sergeant. He achieved the rank of Sergeant. We are recording this on May 3rd, 2013. I am Heidi Gerstmyer and I am conducting this interview. No relation. So can you tell us where you were born and how you grew up?
Texarkana, Arkansas. And the Texans said I was born on the wrong side of the street. Because the middle of the street, and the main street going through the city, it was a town about, I say, by that time it was about 50,000. And you go down the middle of the street, and if your car would split the center line, half of the car would be in Texas and half would be in Arkansas. And I was born on the wrong side of the street. So anyway, that's where I was born. And I grew up just north of there, about 50 miles, and in a small town. Lovely people, and I had a great time growing up. My father was a mechanical engineer, but my mother and father separated when I was 2, so I knew him, but I didn't know him that well. He was in the First World War, and he was gassed in France in the First World War. But the gas was, it was mustard gas, and they dropped that all around them, and he got it on his back like that. So he was in engineering corps in the First World War. And I grew up in this little town, and I quit school when I was 2 years old. Nobody could figure out why. And I wouldn't tell my mother. I wouldn't tell anybody.
So did you have other relatives that served? Did you have other relatives that served?
I did in that town. My uncle was a railroad, we called him depot agent. He was the agent for the Kansas City Southern Lines. And he was my surrogate father, really. And so I grew up, when I was 9 years old, I learned the Morse code from him.
Did you serve?
Yeah.
Did he serve in the military? Did he serve in the military?
No, he was a railroad agent.
Okay. Did you have other relatives that did serve in the military?
My brother.
Your brother?
Mm-hmm. He was a year younger than me, a year and 20 days younger than me. He was in the Navy, and he was on, I guess, the ship that had these photographs of Churchill and all of those people. But he was in Okinawa, and I think he got some kamikazes up there. There's a lot of kamikazes going on in Okinawa when I was still in Minda now.
So you were drafted out of high school, correct?
Yeah,
Okay.
right after I got out.
And where did you go right after you got out?
Went to, excuse me, I went to Camp Chaffee, Arkansas. That was the deportation center for all Arkansas kids. And then I went to California, a place called Camp Roberts, which was between Los Angeles and San Francisco. And I went through the training there for, I think it was about 6 months, and then went home for a quick vacation, went back and went to Camp Pittsburgh in northern California by San Francisco. It was the closest camp to them, evidently. And we left there about 2 or 3 days later. We got on a ship, and we were headed for Australia. We didn't know where we were going, but when we got on the ship, we found out where we were going. And the first day out of San Francisco, everybody just about got sick. Oh, it was rough water, rough. And roughest shipwright I had, really. But I had another one that later on I'll tell you about. But it took us 16 days to go 8,000 miles. We landed in Brisbane, Australia. And we didn't stop anywhere. We didn't stop at any of the islands. We went straight. We didn't even see land for 16 days. And we were chased by a submarine. About halfway down, the submarine took. So we started going like that, catty-corner. And we outran them because that ship was 32 knots. It could make 32 knots. Fastest ship, I guess, on the water then. And we didn't have to, we couldn't take on convoy to protect us because we were too fast. So we just moved on to Australia. And 16 days later, I got off in Brisbane, Australia, and trained there for about 3 weeks. A beautiful city, by the way. And then went to a place called Townville, which is just north of there. And I told you about that, where they lost my identification and 2 other guys, and we stayed in the...
Would you mind summarizing that real quick? Would you mind summarizing that real quick?
Oh, yeah. Well, when we got to Townsville, we went to roll call, and they didn't call our names. So that the next day, when we got up, we said, well, what are we going to do? There are 3 of us. And I said, well, we all agreed that we'd go up to the hills and just play around. We went up in the hills and we'd chase wallabies around. That's a little kangaroo. And we were lucky we didn't see any, deadly snakes, because they have some deadly ones there we didn't know about. And so we did that for 2 weeks and watched the guys drill down there. And we figured, well, we had enough drilling anyway. So anyway, we went back one day after a long day in the hills, and they called our names. That was it. So we started training then. And then we went on to, got on a ship in Townville, I think it was, and went up to Lae, New Guinea. And that was the thickest jungle I'd ever been in. I couldn't see you in front of me, But we needed jungle training, so we got into this little town, which had been taken by my division earlier, in 1941. And they were the first division in the South Pacific. And then the 32nd was later. The 32nd went into combat first, and we went in second. And I don't know where they went, but our guys went over the Owen Stanley Range. It was a mountainous territory, very heavy jungles. And so anyway, one day my officer, or Master Sergeant, I guess he was, said, take 3 of us to go out and get bamboo, which was about this big, to put around our tent. So we did that, and I got lost, and I heard this chopping up on the hill, and I went up there, like this, and it was cleared out. And I looked up before I got up there because the chopping stopped, and it was a kind of steep hill like that. So I looked up, and there were 4 New Guinea natives staring at me, eyeballs that big, And so the only thing I could think about, I knew that they would sell you a stalk of bananas for 1 cigarette, or knock out all the coconuts for you for 1 cigarette. So I had a half pack of Luckies in my pocket, and I just threw the whole thing to them. And then they pointed over the ridge and said, they're down there. They didn't say anything, but they pointed over. So I went and found them. And anyway, I thought I was going to be put in the pot right then. And so we moved on up to...
So was it common to run into locals?
In New Guinea? Not very common. I'll tell you about one after the Helendia campaign. Was during the campaign. But we went to islands called the Carolina Islands, and we just stayed there overnight, and then made a fake to Truck, which was a heavily fortified Japanese island. And we faked at Truck, but went to New Guinea, which wasn't far from Lae, actually, just up around there. And we hit that island, and there were 2 battleships, I think 2 battleships, 2 aircraft carriers, a whole passel of smaller ships, you know. And so that was the first beachhead I made with we had to go down the ladder from the ship and then get on the barges. And that was the first and last barge I was on because I was on a bigger barge than that, but that was for a different reason. But that's the one that the front went down like that. And
What happened there?
then, well, that's just the way we landed then, you know. And after that, they had newer ships, and so it was a small little ship, but it would go right up to the beach. And it had little ladders on each side. So they'd drop down the ladders to the beach, and we'd go down the ladders, so we didn't have to get wet. And we did not, I was with that MacArthur, and MacArthur did not let us hit a beach where we were fired upon. Contrary to the Marines, who got blistered every time they hit the beach. Like Iwo Jima, you know, you've heard of that, I guess. But that combat lasted 2 weeks, and I told you about the hammock, didn't I? The hammock. Well, some bright guy in the United States designed this hammock that had mosquito netting on it and a top on it. And you've seen them, I guess, recently, but they have zipped up, and it's got a screen there. Mosquitoes couldn't possibly get to it. But the Japanese did. They got 2 of our guys.
While they were
the
sleeping?
First night, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
In that hammock. I slept in it that first night, but no more. But in about dusk, you could reach up and grab, just close your hand and it'd be full of mosquitoes. We were just loaded with mosquitoes. Plus big snakes and all sorts of things.
So the conditions were really rough.
Yeah. But the first thing that happened to me when I hit the beach in Helendia was that we went through a swamp up here, and I told you about that. It was a swamp that had little nubbins you could hold on to once in a while, find one. And my friend Sam Katz was behind me, and I talked. He was sinking, and he said, "Ireland, get me out of here." So we pulled him out. That was a lot of fun. But we went about 100 yards and couldn't go any farther. Got too deep. They didn't know about that, of course. And so we had to come back through it. And then we went around another way. And so that combat, there wasn't much action there at all. They were just, I saw 2 Japanese dead the first day. And they were real small and had cleanly shaven faces, and their hands were real small. And nice looking guys, about my age. And so we went on up and overlooked the village where the Japanese had been living, but they left and went on up through the jungle somewhere. When we hit, it was the largest task force in the South Pacific, or in the world at that time, I guess, that hit that beach. And 2 of my friends here in Clemson, my neighbor was one of the naval pilots who bombarded the place. And one of the, have you ever been to Anderson and saw this? You haven't been there. Well, there's a man that was the state representative for years and years and years. And he had a big farm down there, and so he flew the same beach. He hit the same beach. We met in a barber shop. He was talking about Helendia, and I said, well, that's where I was. And anyway, from there, I went to about 2 weeks later, we hit this little island called Biak, and it was only 25 miles long and about 15 miles wide. And it was solid coral. Most of it was coral, solid coral. And we'd have to dig sometimes with, you have enough Is that okay? Yeah, you'd have to dig the foxholes, which we slept in every night. No, we'd have to dig it every night. And we'd have to dig it with our trench knives because the little shovel, the pick and shovel couldn't get into this stuff. It was so hard. It'd take forever to. Anyway, we fought there for, oh man, that was terrible. That was terrible.
Why do you say that?
Too many people killed on our own. And one morning I got up and I had that much water in my canteen. And they told us that they were supposed to get water to us by 10 o'clock. And, well, I made coffee with mine, and some others did too. But some kept theirs. The older guys kept theirs. They knew better. And I still had the 41st Division. When they first came to the South Pacific, they were with us in all of these combats. Some of them didn't go to, most of them got out before we went to Japan. But anyway, that morning I made coffee, and by 10 o'clock, they didn't have any water for us. Well, we were on the equator, and it was about 130 degrees to 125 to 35 degrees. And sometimes it would reach 40. And at night, it would get down to 90 degrees, and we'd get real cold, It was different. And so anyway, that day, we stopped, literally stopped, because we couldn't go any farther. Everybody, my tongue swelled and I couldn't talk. And so about 12 o'clock, I noticed a little ball about this big in the sky. And it grew and it grew and it grew. And it poured down rain about 1 o'clock. And I found a little tree that had a fork in it, and the water was coming out like that. And I went over and laid down and got full of water. I'm telling you, it was terrible.
Was it common to not get supplies?
No, that was the first time that happened. I don't know what happened, but never did hear. But we survived that anyway. And then the combats were just too long to tell. They were every day for 3.5 months. And let's see, what?
Was it hard to live through that every day?
Oh, well, you knew that you could be killed any time. That was always hanging over your head, every combat we made. But we couldn't worry about that. No point in it, So we went on and did our job, and now this in Biak, we had what we called a Banzai charge, which was, they would start, well, we were on a ridge that was cleared by the Dutch. Dutch owned this island, and they had a big gun up there about that big. It was shooting way out in the bay. And so it was cleared, but then the jungle started about 50 yards away. And the Japanese came down through the jungle and killed the 2 guards that we had up there, and then started firing at us and killing us and shooting us. We would take turns on the machine gun night. I would stay on for so long, like an hour or so, or 2 hours, and then the other guy would come on, and I'd get out of the hole and just come over here if there wasn't any combat going on, But when this Banzai charge started, it was early in the morning, and I'd gotten out of my hole and was resting, and when the firing started, I knew what was happening. But there was a little stump about this big, about that high. I got down behind that and started shooting my carbine. I had a little carbine. This guy over here, he didn't know where he was shooting. I didn't know that because there's so much noise going on. And later on, I found out that my lieutenant, he was a first lieutenant, I think. He had been in the Air Force as a sergeant, but he joined the infantry, I guess, to go up in rank. It was a foolish thing to do, but that morning he was killed. And he had a hole right here, and I helped the medic. Bear and I, my sergeant, went up and pulled him out of the hole and brought him back to a little knoll that was, you know, not much protection actually, but we got him behind that, and I helped the medic hold his head while he was putting in the, you know, he was trying to give him
An IV.
Yeah, it was, his veins had collapsed already. He had lost enough blood, the veins collapsed. But anyway, I was holding his head, and his head slipped, and his brains rolled out on my arm right here, this part. It was a big hunk of gray. It was a strange color. Just, and the medic said, "Well, Ireland, haven't you seen blood before?" And I said, "I've seen plenty of it." So I'll hold his head. So he bandaged the head. They took him down to the hospital, and they took his head, the half of his head from right there. But he had lost so much of the brain power, you know, it was right here, that he would have been a vegetable. So he died 2.5 days later. The guy right in front of me, while this was going on, was shot through right there by snipers out there. They were about 50 yards away. You know, we stopped them right at the edge of the jungle. Our mortars behind us went up like this and down and just blew them all over the trees. And anyway, the guy, another sergeant, was shot. He was standing up on his knees. You know, everybody else was down like this shooting, and he was trying to look where they were coming from. Well, they shot him right away. And anyway, that was a terrible battle. Now that
What was that battle called? What was that battle called?
Biak. It was one of the battles in Biak. It was the last one I was in, really. And it was close to the end of it. They were coming out of a hospital cave there were caves all over this island and these ridges, you know. And we took one ridge after another, and then the air drones, we had to take 3 air drones. And we took those, and it took a long time though, over 3 months. And then this guy that was shot right here, just right close to me, just rolled over and sat in a ridge, you know, in a crevice in a ridge, and he lived for 4 hours. And so at that time it had all settled down, and they had gone back, the ones that were left had gone back to their hospital caves, okay, which was not far away, just on the other side of it. And so I want to tell you a story about this. When I was in Corpus Christi, Texas, I moved. After I graduated from college, I went to Texas, to Corpus Christi, and it's a beautiful city. If you've never been there, go. It's a gorgeous place. And right on the water in the bay. And I was in a barber shop, and I read this magazine. It was, I guess it was in the Time or one of the magazines. And I was reading about this hospital cave, exactly where we were, and they had gone back to the hospital cave. And it told all about that. But what was interesting to me is that the officer said, one of the guys, one of them was wounded. I guess the rest of them were killed, but you know, I don't know how many there were. It must have been 10 or 15, something like that. But he said, and there was a wounded guy there, and they all rushed at him. And that's what this article is talking about. All rushed at him. And he pointed his gun at them, and he said, "I'll kill any man who eats that food before it's cooked." And that was amazing to me. But we found human beings under one patrol. Found at the end of Biak, found 4 or 5 Japanese around a tarp, and like this, and and they killed the Japanese, and then they went in and pulled up the tarp, and there was this native hanging there. And they had cut off the meat and his legs and things like that. Now, we heard when we were in the Philippines that not my unit, but another unit in our division, which was, you know, we had 3 regiments, so there are a lot of men. This was close to a hospital, and the Japanese had controlled that, and and this flyer, the Air Force guy, shot down there, and they got him, and they hung him up and killed him first, and then they started cutting the meat off his legs and cut his heart out, and had a frying pan. My division, my battalion, heard this story and told us all about it. We didn't see the guy, but that's what happened. See, they were cannibalistic because they were dying from hunger. They were eating berries, and one night a guy came into we had a mess hall after it was all over, and the Japanese would come. They saw Bob Hope there. We had Bob Hope come in right after our combat there, and gave us a Jerry Colonna, Francis Langford, all of them came in and gave us a evening of entertainment, which was spectacular. And the guys had our special services had built a fence around this and built a stage for them, and we were still finding Japanese out. And if they were caught, they'd be killed. They knew that. But if they could sneak in, sometimes we'd come back from a movie that was on the beach, and we'd be firing at the planes that would go over the Akak and never hit one. But anyway, the Japanese, I saw 2 of them thumb a ride from the MP, military police. It was out on the little road, and they wanted to give up. And some guys found them in their bunks when they got back to their tent, trying to give up. And of course they would. But that was a nasty battle, nasty. And then the next one was just as bad. It was in the Philippines, 3.5 months in the mountains around Zabawanga, and then we had to go to Devoa and go up a river, and lost one of our buddies in the water that couldn't swim, and I couldn't swim either. But I wasn't foolish enough to get in a boat to go across that rough water either. Anyway, in the Philippines, the living conditions weren't as hard, because we had enough food and enough water, and we walked across on the east side of that island was flat, big part of it. Some were mountains. We finally got into the mountains, but I went up a river there and met the Filipinos who lived in this little town called Cotabato. And Cotabato was a small town along the river. And so we met some people there, and they were very nice. And of course they were isolated, you know, really isolated. Moros all over the place. And so, but anyway, that was after Zamboanga was over. In Zamboanga, we fought there for, I guess, about two and a half months. And the other time we went to Devoa and then went on up the river, chasing them. And we found them, and we were on top of a mountain. We finally got in the mountains. On top, over the mountain was jungle. And so in the morning, we'd look down there and there'd be little guys running around about that tall, way down And they'd shoot at us in the morning, and we'd shoot back, and in the evening they'd shoot at us again, we'd shoot back. And that, we didn't fight, we weren't fighting them, but we were chasing them. We got them right down there, they couldn't go anywhere. So that was the end of that, and we had airplanes dropping supplies to us. And we had, when we first went, we had burros carrying all the stuff, and mules carrying it up to where we needed it. And so that combat wasn't much at all. And finally, the trucks came in from that. This, I don't know how far this was, but it was a long way. We had to go by ship or a barge. It was called an LST barge. You had to go to by a barge and hit Devoa. They call it with a B. V is a B in Spanish. B, Devoa. And we went up the river and chasing the Japanese and so forth. Anyway, we never did encounter them until that mountaintop. But I went 16 days without washing my hands. It rained, God, it rained. And our little tents, you'd touch it from inside and it would leak. It's not very good, you know. We just dig a trench around it and hope that it wouldn't come inside. It was awful. That was a picnic compared to the rest of it. So from there, I went back to Zabawanga. The trucks came and got us and took us on north and to the water out to the left. And they took us back to Zabawanga, and then we finished training and were headed for Japan. So I was there one night visiting my girlfriend, and I heard all this gunfire going off. And I went over to this black outfit, which were right across the road. They came over one night when I was there, and they started throwing rocks and stuff. They were drunk, you know, and throwing rocks on the place and raising Cain. And her mother was a substantial woman, had a bolo about this long, and I didn't have a bolo. It's a knife, big knife that they use. It's about this long, and she got right behind me, and she said, "You let me out there." And she got there waiting for them to come in. They never did come in. She would have cut them up. But anyway, I asked the MPs what you should do about that. And, this one said, shoot him. We'll take care of it later. So I brought my buddies with me the next night, and every night after that. And we walked right in front of them, that outfit, and showed them that we meant business, don't bother us anymore. But that was a terrible thing that happened to all those other guys that were cut up and thrown in the ditch. Now, I didn't see any of this, mind you, but I heard about it, and I heard the gunfire going on as I was going home that night. Nasty. Anyway, Japan was very pleasant. The Japanese were excellent to us, very, very good. There was, I got there October 4th, and that was about a month and a half after the bomb dropped. And
Where exactly in Japan were you? Where exactly in Japan?
It was a naval base, a submarine base called Kure.
And that was near Hiroshima?
Yes, 13 miles. Kure. And we went to Hiroshima the next day when we got settled up. Oh, we went downtown one time in this little town. The submarine base was beautiful. It was a circular base. And then they had a channel coming out from there to the water, the Pacific. And this was big enough for our ship to get in, but we never would have made it because they had big guns on both sides. They had blown us out of the water right there. So that was a very well protected submarine base. Then I met, we went, the officer said, anybody wants to go to Hiroshima? Hop on this truck, we'll go. And we went the next day. something there, 2 days later. And it was amazing. I showed you the picture of it.
Can you describe what you saw?
Hmm?
Can you describe what you saw and how it felt when you went?
Oh, sure. It was, glass was melted into glass. I brought some of that home for my mom. And I brought, later on, I got 2 kimonos and brought those back for her. But the steel was twisted. There was a big, my buddies and I went over to this big steel, it was, you know, one of those bank things. Couldn't get it open, it was all twisted up. Telephone poles, there are a few telephone poles standing, wooden telephone poles, believe it or not. And the streetcar tracks were, some of them weren't damaged at all. But the bridge was blown out right there, just no bridge. The whole thing was just flat, perfectly flat. And there was a piece of a structure, a metal big building, standing out there probably 3 miles away or 4 miles away that we saw. And it's, you can see it in that photograph, I think. And it was, we didn't stay too long. We just stayed that, we got there, and it was only 13 miles, so we got there in a hurry, and we rode around on a bus, you know, for a while, and they used wood for their bus, they'd have to stop once in a while and put wood on the fire in the back to keep it going.
Would you mind showing the photo?
Yeah.
Just hold it up.
Find it. Yeah.
Oh, that's all right.
Here it is. Yeah, here it is. Okay, here's what I was talking about, this thing way back here. I think one of those they kept as a monument.
Do you mind turning it around?
It's a mess. You can see how everything is just demolished totally. That thing exploded, I can't remember, I think they said just above the ground. But the people were cleaning up already. And that was just a month and a half after I got there.
The locals were?
Yeah, they were cleaning up, beginning to clean up the city.
Did they interact with you guys at all?
Hmm?
Did they interact with the soldiers at all?
Not very much, but at one time on the street of where I was, this was in another town called Oramichi, up just north of there, closer to Tokyo, I believe. And we became friends with them. I have pictures of.
They weren't hostile at all?
Hmm?
They weren't hostile at all?
No, not at all. Now, one thing happened though during December 7th. That was the celebration of. It's when they attacked Pearl Harbor, December 7th. There was a group of paratroopers, Japanese paratroopers, that started some problems in where we were in Oramichi.
What do you mean?
I mean in Curie, around Curie. They were I guess they were attacking, so we had to keep our machine guns handy. Keep those handy. Well, now in Japan, I'll just put this on top. In Japan, I left there Christmas Eve to come home. But in Oramichi, before we came home, there was a stack of guns, rifles, way up high. And they said, you can have one if you don't take it home. So I brought it home with me. I was going to give it to my brother, who's a hunter. And he didn't want it, So I kept it thinking, well, maybe I'll have a couple of boys one day and I'll just pass it on to them. They didn't want it either. I had 3 boys, and they didn't want it. And anyway, I met a family there. Now, the tradition, I think, is that I heard was that the higher up a hill or mountain that you lived, the more money you had. That makes sense. You know. But this family were about halfway up this hill, and they had a beautiful, beautiful home. It was, I can't believe the amount of paper in the house. You know, the two girls invited my buddy and I to dinner one night, and there were no chairs like this to sit in. You sat on your knees, and I couldn't do that. That just killed me. I never could do that, even when I was 20 then. I got home when I was 21. It was the strangest thing, and in the corner of that room where we had a little table where we ate, and then in the corner was a wooden bed. And in the middle of the room, which is 3 times as large as this, was a big pot with charcoals in it. And that was their fire and it was October, getting cold. And we got there in October. I left in December. But in Onomichi, we went up there about 2 weeks after we landed in the submarine base. We stayed there for a while, and then we went on up to Onomichi. And that's where I met most of the Japanese. And they were very kind to us. And one of the girls wanted to come home with me. She was 16 years old. I said, well, dear, I can't take you home with me. The Army won't allow that. But I kept in touch with her. She wanted to learn to speak English, and I got letters from her, and she said she had finally gotten an MFA, a master's degree in English. And I never did hear from her again. But she was nice. And then in Onomichi, I met a painter there, a Japanese painter. And he was painting portraits of soldiers, American soldiers. And he could do one in 45 minutes. I timed him. I sat there all day long watching him paint. So he asked me if I would send him some paint. He couldn't get paint. He could get brushes, but he couldn't get paint. I said, well, if I get the opportunity, I will send you some. So when I got back, I went to art school, Kansas City Art Institute, and the university, later on. But I sent him a whole set of oil paints, good oil paints. He never did get them. Somebody found them on the way, probably in Japan somewhere. He never did get it. So I felt terrible about that because I watched him so long. And he was so nice, a real nice guy. Boy, could he paint. I met another artist and his brother that who was influenced by the French Impressionist, and he was a good painter. And I went to Kabuki Theater and saw all of that. And that was interesting, but I didn't know what they were saying. But it was very colorful and very interesting.
So did you have a lot of free time while you were there then?
Yeah, I had more free time than anywhere else. Mm-hmm. We didn't have to do any training. We didn't do anything. We just occupied the place. And anyway, when I came home, I was going to bring my uncle a bottle of tequila. Not tequila, but sake. And I had a big bottle of it like that. About that big. And I got on the train, and when we got on the train, my buddies and I, they told us we couldn't take that. I said, well, why not? They told me I could. And, well, I don't know who told me I could. I just figured I could bring it to I kept it in my duffel bag, you know, but I couldn't. We drank it on the way, and it was a lot of fun, but we didn't, there were several guys involved in that. But, you know, that's basically what, I have a lot more stories, but that'd take too long.
So how was the transition back home now, after all that you'd seen? Was it
When I
hard?
came back home,
Was it hard to come back to a normal life?
it was, yeah, it was, well, my mother said that I wouldn't sit down long enough to have dinner. And I would not stay in the house at night unless the shades were down, all pulled down. I didn't want anybody seeing me. I wanted to see them, you know. But in the South Pacific, that I learned that if you look at something at night and you keep looking at it like a bush or something, it'll move. Now that could have been my eyes, but I had 20/15 vision in both eyes. And I could see, I'd stare at that thinking that it moved, but it didn't. And I'd look away and then I'd go back to it and it was still there. One night I saw, in Guinea, I saw two Japanese at moonlight, in the moonlight. I was on guard and I saw these two guys creeping along this hill right in front of us. And they moved at night, we didn't. But we weren't allowed to fire at them because they would disrupt the whole thing, you know. They'd find out where we were and so forth. So I just watched them all that time. And they were creeping along, they weren't moving too fast. But that was an interesting thing. Beautiful birds over there in New Guinea. The jungle was beautiful. When I got lost, I was looking at the jungle to see what was there, you know. Well, let's see, that's about it. That's a long story.
Incredible, yeah. Thank you so much for your service and all your time.
You're welcome.